Presented by the Making Star Wars Podcasting Network. This is the Cantina Cast, your watering hole for thought-provoking Star Wars discussion, character dissections, quote and scene analysis, honest opinions on the Star Wars news that interests you, and whatever else these guys come up with. Here are your hosts, Mike and Joa.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 216, The Last Jedi Kylo Ren dissection, I guess we'll call it. I don't know. These titles are getting a little weird. We had a big, long one last week, and it was almost like a carnival title, I guess you could say. But anyway, I'm your host, Mike, and I am joined this week again with Albert. Albert, say hello.
Hello. Hey, Mike. Hello, Cantina patrons.
Yes. All right. So Joe is not going to join me this time. He's going through some stuff, so I'll address that at some other point. But, you know, that's being that. We got a Kylo Ren dissection of The Last Jedi to get to. The show must go on, so let's get into this. We got a bit of news first, which is interesting. It's funny how Rian Johnson's saying these kind of things now that after, you know, the heat from The Last Jedi has come out. You know, some fans like it, some other fans love it. And then there's me and you, Albert. I think we're in the middle somewhere.
Yep.
More on the like side, I guess, than the hate side. We're definitely not haters. We're just, you know, I don't know. But anyway, so as you titled it, the truth is out there. So in an interview with the HuffPo, director Rian Johnson was reflecting on the big reveal and explaining it was the most difficult, dramatical for Rey in the movie to hear this, you know, that she's a nobody. Now, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not exactly going off of what he said here. But what did you think? Because, you know, he's playing on it. It would be the big "I am your father" twist. I didn't see it as a twist, really. And maybe because we're hardcore fans and we podcast about it, people blog about it, have fan sites, that whole thing. We knew it was either going to be nobody or a Skywalker or something kind of in the middle, different, like Kenobi or something like that. So for us, I guess, like I said prior going into the movie, I don't think we're going to get any big twists because, you know, we kind of expect the unexpected and kind of the, you know, maybe it's just not going to be what we thought. I don't know. What do you think of his comments here?
Yeah, and I think one of the lines was that last line he said near the end of the article where he says, anything's still open and I'm not writing the next film, right? Abrams and Terrio's doing that. So
yeah, which is very important, Katie, you know, because you wanted to mention how Ryan, you know, JJ had nothing to do with episode 8 there. But anyway, go ahead. I don't mean to throw Katie under the bus. No. I just like busting her chops.
Absolutely, we all do. But you know, I think so. To me, when you go look at the article, I mean, honestly, to some extent, this whole article just kind of flies in the face of anyone who feels like her parentage, you know, wasn't something that was important to fans or wasn't stoked by JJ in The Force Awakens. I think a lot of people have conflated the idea that, you know, the fate of her parents with it never mattered. It did matter. I mean, so much that Ryan went there to create her conflict. And now I get what he did, I get what he was trying to do. And I can certainly see, you know, from a storytelling perspective, how this trope of your past does not define you allows Rey to really be anything she wants, you know, being freed of ties to Skywalker, Kenobi, or, you know, whatever direct tie to the past lineage, you know, headcanon that people came up with. It's just one of many blank slates that Ryan laid down in The Last Jedi. But at the same time, you know, if her parents are someone, or, you know, they have a past and they can work it into a compelling and riveting story arc for Rey, you know, which still allow her, you know, her character to grow. And I guess I'd be okay with that. I don't really have a problem. I don't need multiple layers of this stuff in my Star Wars movie. I'm okay with some of the old fashioned tropes and some of the stuff that, you know, I've heard people say, oh, it's boring, it's predictable. That's, you know, there are a lot
Star Wars,
it's Star Wars. And there's a lot of movies out there, honestly, that are very predictable, and they're great movies to watch and they're great movies to enjoy. So then that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that it's coming out now because of, like, a few weeks back, he was kind of like, you know, no, it doesn't matter. She's a nobody type of stuff. And here we go. But here's the thing. And I've said this to a handful of people, Becca, one of them. And I said, you know, it may, and this, I caught this on my second viewing, and I think I even said this maybe on the second review show that we did, where I was like, all right, it may look on the surface that he ignored JJ's stuff. and it may seem like he crapped on this or that, but he really didn't, because I think even Joe had pointed out that it was kind of like he didn't really answer any questions, because I remember Joe kind of like almost like throwing his arms up and say, well, he didn't really answer the parentage question, because I had automatically assumed Kylo's lying anyway, because and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Albert, is when he's in the throne room after Snoke's dead and Rey leaves and he's there and Hux is there and he's laying down. To me, it seems like he's pretending to be dead or hurt or something, and then he blames Rey. Like it's showing the example that he will lie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And of course, Luke kind of tells a fib, so to speak. So, it's not like he's not going to lie either. So I'm just like, for me, Kylo, I don't really have that trust issue, and we're going to get into it in a little bit here, and stuff like that. But what do you think of that?
Yeah, I
I
didn't catch that, Mike, to be honest. And I think that's actually pretty intuitive. It kind of changes my perspective, at least for that scene now. But
maybe because that's what I would have done.
Yeah, when you're shady for sure.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Just ask Joe. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say. So what we have. So we've got Ryan now saying, it could or could not be true. Though to be fair, I think I do remember right after it came out, maybe like the 16th or so of December, he did say that at least Kylo Ren believed that what he was saying, right? He wasn't purposely lying, at least in that moment, in that one scene. He really truly believed, like he knew that her parents were nobodies and they were, drunks and did what they did for beer money, that kind of thing. But, we also...
what parent wouldn't do that? I mean, just come on, it's beer money.
Yeah, it's beer money, right. And then we also have, he uses in the same article, going back to it, he mentions that he quotes that shady, what's his name, Kenobi character, with the whole certain point of view line. And if you want to go super meta here, you could say that, our good guy Luke, his line of no one's ever really gone. I don't know, maybe that means her parents could come back. Yeah, they're gone in this movie, they were gone in the first movie, but or maybe just that idea of her parentage being something isn't really truly ever gone, and maybe it could resurface again. Who's to say?
Well, I think in my mind, JJ, and I think this is where I kind of blame JJ a little bit here, is where he set it up so much where, okay, obviously the parents are going to be a thing going forward, because number one, who is this girl, right? That's the main thing. She's powerful. We want to know. It's the Skywalker saga, so, 2 and 2 equals 4 here. And then you have, of course, the ship going away and her saying, come back, and, all these things going on, and you think, all right, and then at the end, she's handing the lightsaber to Luke, and it's heavily implied at that moment. Like, even the casual fans are like, oh yeah, that's Luke's daughter. Like, you know what I mean? And to me, I was watching it last night with my daughter, The Force Awakens, because she's really getting into it now, which is exciting for me as a parent. And that scene where she's up to Luke and she's handing the lightsaber off, and I'm thinking now that scene doesn't mean as much as it did before because of what Ryan did with the whole throwing of the lightsaber thing. I kind of got a little miffed there. That's one of the things that kind of just bothers me, and I'll get over it in time. I mean, it's, I just felt like it was a Saturday Night Live joke there, but, whatever, to borrow someone else's take on it. They said some of the comedy was like that, and I kind of agree with that. But so that kind of took away from it a little bit with me and stuff, and knowing that, as a father of a little girl, that whole, passing the torch. And I've said this before in the podcast where I'm kind of selfish. I wanted that to be that because I wanted it to mirror me, because Luke mirrors a lot of things with my life, that whole thing. So I was a little perturbed, but I mean, again, back to what I was saying, my original point, I think on the surface, it may look like it's like he didn't follow through with these things. But again, like when you watch that vision, you're like, all right, well, he says they're junkers on Jakku and they're in a pauper's grave there or whatever. And you see the ship flying away. You're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I was trying to work this out the other day with an email with Becker. And I was like, all right, well, if they were poor or whatever, they couldn't get off world, even if it was for bear money. You can't imagine, unless they got a lot for Rey, I would imagine a person would go for a lot. I mean, I don't know. And it didn't seem like it was in that vision, like she's sold as slavery, because like she's not a slave to Unkar, right? She's kind of able to do her own thing. So it's like, all right, what'd they sell? I don't get that. Like that was a bit confusing there, but I guess you could look at it one way where, all right, the ship's taken off. They went off world. Maybe they're on Canto Bight and that's her brother. They sold him to the stable guy. I don't know. There's my broom boy theory I'm throwing out there, but I don't know. Any other thoughts on any of that?
Yeah. So I think for that going back to that scene where her parents are leaving, today at work, I had an off conversation with one of my coworkers, and they actually went to go see the movie last week. And prior to going to the movie, they watched The Force Awakens, and this was their first time watching that movie in almost 2 years. And so some of the things were kind of vague, and they mentioned they really didn't, they're not a huge hardcore fan. They're very casual. But that exact conversation, that exact point that you made where for a casual fan, when they went in, they were left with certain things. I mean, there's no mistake about it. There were certain things that they were left with, and they were holding on to that scene in particular, and they were just as surprised. I mean, they probably weren't as, I don't want to use the word offended because that's not what's happening here, but they were definitely surprised that was just something that was kind of dropped, because in their mind, they're led to believe that, hey, this is important. This does mean something, and I'm going to find out in this next movie. And when it didn't, it was kind of a shock. So I don't think we're off base.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. I guess is the casual fan would be shocked, whereas you and I and Joa and Becca and Katie and everybody else would be like, yeah, that's nothing. None of this is surprising because we just did 2 years of dissecting just about everything under the sun, what could possibly be. And here we go. And, it turns out to be this. So I think that's where Ryan was maybe thinking, and he wasn't, which is weird because he did things in the movie that only us hardcore fans would get. So it's like, how is he trying to surprise even I don't know. See, this is where I get a little discombobulated with the whole thing. But anyway, any more final thoughts on that? And we'll move into John Williams and Han Solo.
No, I think let's move on here.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So this was a bit of a shock, and we had some Han Solo news last week, or the Solo spinoff stuff, or Star Wars story, whatever is your flavor you want to call it. Apparently, John Williams is going to score just the theme. Now, see, this messed me up earlier because I thought it was the whole thing, but
right.
You corrected me in the show notes, so I thank you because you saved my skin here because I would have looked like a fool. Go ahead. What do you got here? Yeah.
No, this is good news. Honestly, I mean, because come on, Williams is like. He's 85 years old, folks. He's the greatest of all time, but we know he can't keep doing this. And I know he's got other works. If you go look at his IMDb page, he's got other stuff that he's got in flight and he's working on. So just the fact that he's writing Solo's theme, I think is great news. I thought one of the other things from that announcement that was interesting was that whatever he comes up with as far as the theme goes needs to be approved by Powell and Howard. But I mean, does anyone really think they're going to tell Jay Will, nah, this isn't good enough, dude, right? They're not going to send that stake back. So I don't think that would happen. I think whatever he lays down is probably going to get approved. And if you think about it, Powell, well, let me say Powell, he's one of my favorite composers here recently. I mean, yeah, he scored I think The Adventures of Pluto Nash, but come on, we're not all perfect. But he also scored the How to Tame Your Dragon series, which are some of my favorite soundtracks. Like he's got some really great music in there, and so you've got John Williams now pretty much doing the heavy lifting, right, of the Han Solo theme itself. So that becomes kind of like the cornerstone, and then from there, Powell's got he's got the next piece of it, which is just to kind of build around that cornerstone. So I think it's a good collaboration. I'm kind of really excited now to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised that it wasn't the whole thing. And this is probably my own ignorance of not following the Han Solo spinoff so much is the fact that, I wasn't even aware of this other person doing the score or whatever. And that makes sense because you hadn't heard, it's been so long since they announced that. I just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I'm just surprised John Williams, the guy he's the man, but he is older, but they need to approve his thing. I mean, come on. How's that conversation going to go? The two guys are sitting there. Of course they're going to approve it. Come on.
Exactly.
That's just kind of crazy. But anyway, so that's some pretty good news. I'm very interested. At least John is going in there. I'm curious to what he would do for the theme. I think that's kind of or is this more of like they need to pull some John Williams in to sell the movie in a way because of I hate even using the word, but the backlash of The Last Jedi and stuff, and people are nervous about the Solo film to begin with, where a lot of people are kind of like, I don't know if this is the way to go, and then maybe if we drop John Williams in there, it brings back some of those memories, the nostalgia illusion there, and they go and buy the tickets and stuff. I don't know. What do you think of that? And then we'll move on.
Yeah, I can see that. No, I can see that. I can see where people would look at this and go, okay, something doesn't smell right here if they're bringing in Williams to kind of save face here. They didn't do it. They certainly didn't do it, in Rogue One. So why would they do it here? But, I don't know. This, to me, I kind of see John Williams. He is Star Wars, right? He's invested emotionally and in a lot of different ways in the characters themselves. And maybe it was his choosing. Maybe he decided, hey, I'm not going to do the whole score. I'll leave that for someone else and kind of pass the torch now. But I kind of want that one piece. Let me just do that one piece, knock that out, and then you guys can do the rest of it. I'd like to think that's where it came from, more, from John Williams' heart in wanting to kind of see that character through and write a theme that had never been written for a character that he
I imagine he's going to put a little bit of Han's theme in it, and then just go from there and add to that, and maybe Chewie and that whole thing. Maybe a hint of Leia.
That'd be awesome. I'd like to hear that.
That would be pretty cool. But anyway, all right, well, let's get into our psycho, crazy Kylo Ren, Ben Solo kind of guy, and Katie's throwing her fists up in the air because I said that. Actually, Kylo's more compelling now to me than he was in The Force Awakens here. Like, there's a bit of more intrigue for me, and I'm interested where they're going to go with this character here. But anyway, what has changed since The Force Awakens, which from the beginning of the movie and the end of The Force Awakens, as I mentioned to you last week, Snoke was going to complete his training, and apparently it seems like what was the training? Like, how to tie your shoe or something? Like, it was just really quick. What could he have taught him in the 5 minutes that, between the two movies there? I don't know. But I guess we'll start from the beginning. What's changed at all? Anything at all? I mean, the only other thing I would suggest is maybe his reluctance to kill Mom, whereas his dad, it was kind of like, boom, it wasn't a big deal. Well, I mean, it was. Actually, it wasn't a big deal because as he talks to Rey, that whole thing. But go ahead, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe his reluctance to kill Mom was a result of killing Dad. But going back to that question of what's changed since The Force Awakens. So at the end of The Force Awakens, let's see, he's one less parent that he has to worry about later in life. And at the end of The Last Jedi, he no longer reports to a jerk-faced boss. He's got a new job, right? I'm kidding, sort of. But honestly, we can't say that much has changed from the time that TFA ends, and then with The Last Jedi starting simply immediately right after that. Because we don't have that time jump, and like we said it in the last show, this is one of those areas again where I just feel like, had we gotten more time, we probably would have benefited. I mean, sure, we get to see sort of how the events in The Force Awakens impact Kylo Ren, naturally as the movie progresses, but it's such a short span that you could make an argument that it feels forced, I guess. And that pun was intended. So, but yeah, not much has changed. And as far as the training goes, I'm still unclear on how much time really has passed from the time that movie starts until the throne room, because if we go by, Octu standard time, which I think was like 2 days, 2 nights, somewhere around there, I would say that there's probably not much of any training or, that would have happened in that time span. I mean, he certainly didn't get anything from Snoke apart from, a mental butt whooping and helmet shamed, right? And it kind of stinks because it was a standout moment for me in The Force Awakens when Snoke says, it's time to complete his training. I'm sure Star Wars fans, our listeners, a lot of people, and I remember in that moment and hearing that line, I thought, oh man, this is it. I already can't wait to see the next movie to see what that training is going to look like. And then, here we are in The Last Jedi when we didn't get him. So that kind of was a disappointing piece for me.
Or was the training Snoke dying? Like Snoke, as it says not that you can put a lot of stock in this, but that's not his true appearance, so to speak, right? So is it possible that, and he's saying, I can't be betrayed, I can't do this, and of course the irony is he gets taken in half, and the audience I was with cheered and everything, and there's something missing there, or something that seems a little off. Like Snoke wouldn't be that. Well, then again, the Emperor was kind of like taken back and
True.
Caught with his pants down, so to speak. So yeah, it's possible, but is it more or less like Snoke? Because he plays that mind game thing. So was that the training, like killing your master to go, to that next step, which is what Palpatine would have wanted? Well, maybe not wanted, so to speak, because Palpatine didn't want to relinquish any power at all. And as I always say, Obi-Wan did him a favor by maiming Anakin, and Anakin not being able to overthrow the Emperor, and plus his confidence shaken, so he couldn't do that. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, he's talking down to Kylo, says you're just a child in a mask. Is he just goading him to get him to that moment where he takes that step of being evil, in a sense? I don't know. What do you think?
Maybe. Yeah, I think in that scene, for me, it was really, I think we were seeing just a day in the life of Kylo Ren and Snoke. I think that was just an everyday occurrence almost, right? He slams him down mentally, verbally, and then brings him up later, right? It's just kind of that ebb and flow, and then just in manipulating him and corrupting him and bringing conflict within him in a lot of different ways. I'd like to table that conversation about what, or maybe Snoke's intention, or did he die? Or did he die on his own accord?
We'll save that for the Snoke
for later. Yeah, when we get to a little bit later, or even later on, when we talk about, how did Snoke not see that coming?
Yeah, he's saying,
right? If he's in Kylo's mind,
they're saying I can't be deceived and blah 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 blah, and then there you go. It's almost like reminded me of, as soon as he said that and the lightsabers next to him, it reminded me of like when I'm watching a football game and they're lining up to kick the winning football, the field goal, and the announcer says, "Oh, he hasn't missed all year," and then boom, he misses. They lose the game, and that whole thing there. But here's the thing that I found interesting with this is because I'm thinking when I and this popped in my head the other day, and with the Force Awakens, and I watched it last night, and I'm thinking to myself, well, when does Kylo come up with the plan to do what he did with killing killing Snoke? Like, he wanted to overthrow him, which it goes to the line, "I will finish what you started." Maybe he's playing off of what Anakin. And then the interesting thing is he says, "Well, show me, grandfather," again. Like, he's saying, like, something happened at one point where, I don't know, the Force ghost of Darth Vader kind of showed up and kind of showed him something or something. I don't know.
Right, he communed with them in some way.
But we've been over that before with like Katie and Joe and I. We've gone back and forth with all that stuff and tried to figure that out. But I don't think we ever came up with it's almost like the prophecy. We never came up with a real solution or anything like that. But when I'm watching The Force Awakens, when is he planning this? Other than that scene where he says, "I will finish what you started." Okay, so now he's going to be the supreme ruler or whatever. That wasn't really Anakin's intentions, though. Anakin, he wanted to overthrow the Emperor at one point, but he wanted to give it really to Padme at that point, and then he wanted to give it to Luke. He just wanted to be the enforcer and just do what he does and stuff like that, and he just wanted his family, as we've discussed plenty of times. So I don't know. What did you think? And even the whole, and this is where it gets back into that whole Snoke plan, and I don't mean to get back into Snoke too much, but when Snoke is the one who puts them together in their minds, right? Like, he links them up and stuff like that. So again, it goes back to your question: how did Snoke not see his death coming and all that other stuff? So something bigger is at afoot here, maybe. Maybe we'll learn more. Maybe JJ went to Ryan and said, "Could you do this or whatever?" And they kind of agreed or whatever. I mean, they're two separate things. That's part of the argument, is that you got directors doing two different things. It seems a little disjointed, I guess you could say. Whereas Ryan's doing one trilogy, it should all line up nice and it shouldn't be a problem. But anyway, enough about that. But what do you think of this whole thing? When do you think Kylo's planning this thing? Because, like he said, we'll finish his training, and you get the sense that, all right, he's not completed, he's not fully there, he's not mature, which is the intriguing thing now that he's leading the pack, is that he's really not mature, and that maybe he learned that lesson when he got in front of Luke, and we'll discuss that in a moment. When we get to it and stuff. But I don't know. What do you think? So
I think, I always took that line of finishing what you started to mean in every way, whether consciously or not. So, for example, in almost a very literal sense, I take it as, ruling the galaxy. And for Kylo, that also includes the dethroning of Snoke. He can't rule the galaxy. He can't rule the First Order or get, whatever else he wants, which I'll get to in a second, unless he gets Snoke. Snoke is an obstacle. He's got to get rid of him. Yeah, I mean, if you want to go deeper, Kylo will be going down, I think, that path that Anakin went down with regards to relationships, his family, however fatal or flawed, that will be for him. And we can save the Reylo talk for another show, but I mean, there is an argument to be made that he's making all of those same tragic choices that Anakin did. And in doing so, again, willfully or not, he's attempting to finish what his grandfather could not there as well. We know that Snoke and the First Order were hell-bent on destroying Luke, and we get that in the opening line of The Force Awakens. So I think that Snoke, maybe he had a vision at one point that a Skywalker would bring about his end, with the irony being that it was Ben Solo, heir apparent to Lord Vader, someone of the Skywalker bloodline, was the person all along. So Snoke thought it was Luke, but surprise, it turned out to be Ben.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess that's a good assessment to look at it that way. And I guess because everyone was focusing on Rey, you kind of don't look at it as, well, Kylo was the one that kind of did that, because it says it in the visual dictionary that he thinks the Skywalker is the one to bring his demise, or the First Order, or whatever it may be, and stuff like that. So anyway, we'll move on to, does Kylo, and this is something that Joe brought up a few weeks ago on the Luke dissection with the, and this is very easy to kind of put two and two together here with this. And I think we kind of, even in The Force Awakens, got this sense about him that he has this sense of entitlement. And I guess this is where Joe wanted to go. So we'll bring it up here on the show and go from there. So, but you got a list here, and you want to ask me questions here, I think it is, or whatever you wanted to do here. So let's get into this.
I want to ask you a few questions. All right. So I got some questions. So I went out and looked at, sense of entitlement, and I had my own kind of meaning, or I guess, understanding of what that meant. But I thought, let me run through these, and you just kind of give me a quick yes or no answer. And if you want to elaborate on them, we can. But give me a quick yes or no answer, and maybe we can kind of assess whether or not we feel like Kylo Ren is, has a sense of entitlement, right? So, all right. So the first question, the first one, it's all about me. Yes or no? Is that Kylo's mentality? All right. There's more take than there is give.
Yes.
There is competition with everyone.
In his mind, I think he makes it up. But you got to blame Snoke on this, because he does what the Emperor used to do and pits him against someone else, like he did with Vader. Like you get that with Hux and obviously Kylo. They're going against each other, and that changes as the movie changes. But that's a long-winded answer. But go ahead, continue.
Yep, that's fair. All right. So number 4, they impose unrealistic demands on friends and family.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I definitely see this with Kylo. And I'm not saying initially maybe he was right in a sense, but once you get down that rabbit hole, you make stuff up in your head. It's like the competition thing. Like I do that with me because I'm a competitive. So, all the other podcasts I'm competing against, and I make it up where I have a chip on my shoulder. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Nobody's done anything bad, and I have no ill will with anyone. But in my own mind, I'm trying to be the number one. So, I kind of just to psych myself out. But with Kylo, he takes it in that dangerous route of kind of, thinking this is how it really is when it really isn't that way. You know what I mean? Like I can realize
exactly
it's me psyching myself up, but it's not real serious and it doesn't mean anything. It's just me pumping myself up to do a good show if I can. But anyway, continue, sir.
All right. So number 5, they punish people when they don't get what they want.
That would appear so, although the only time he maybe does that is in The Force Awakens, when he kind of takes it out on the console. He takes it out on the machines more than people, really. I don't see him. Maybe
he took it out on Hux, right? In The Last Jedi.
Hux, and he did in The Force Awakens, that one guy, after he tells him about the Falcon, after he smashes the console, he kind of pulls him close, but he doesn't go full, like, crazy. You know what I mean? Like he did with Hux there. But go ahead.
Yeah, and that was always an interesting dynamic, not to break away from the list here, but, when he lashed out, there were some people that obviously turn away. We had that in The Force Awakens. We had that group of soldiers that kind of just turned the other way and left. Yeah. But, we had the other one there that he didn't even seem like he was really fearing from his life. He was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to let him get it out, and kind of wince to make sure nothing gets in my eyes. But he didn't really take it out on that guy, or at least we didn't see that played through. So that was always an interesting dynamic, because you would think, if in that situation, what would Vader have done? He would have just killed the dude, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or the Emperor.
Exactly.
I mean, without a doubt, without any second thought.
Well, is that still showing a bit of his humanity? I don't know. Maybe. But continue, sir.
All right. Where are we at? Number 7. But they want others. I'm sorry. They don't feel sorry for others. That's the next one.
No, I don't think they do. He does at all. I think I think he goes into the deception with Rey, and I think maybe there's a little bit of that, like where he feels sorry, and because he wants an apprentice, he wants something out of it. So he's trying to lure her in. So I don't think it's genuine sorry. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. But this is the next one. They want others to feel sorry for them.
Absolutely, because this is his manipulation of trying to pull her to his side. And you could almost make the argument that she's kind of doing the same thing, but hers is more of an innocence and a pure standpoint. Because
she's coming from a good place.
Correct. And he's coming from the darker place where I need you to because I need you for this particular thing, where he's manipulating her, where she like genuinely wants to save him and have that bond and all that other stuff. But go ahead.
Yeah. Double standards are par for the course.
Double standards, I would go with. Yeah.
Say yes?
Yeah.
Okay. They crave attention and admiration.
I think he does from obviously his parents, or he did at one time, and then he found the substitute with Snoke. So he did with Snoke, and then he wanted it with Rey, and now he's rejected completely. So it's going to be interesting, and this is where the intriguing thing comes with him, as we mentioned last week briefly, of an apprentice, or what's going to happen next. Because I think he's kind of, in a sense, like Anakin, where he wants someone in his life to kind of rule together, in a sense, whether it be the Reylo thing or Rey Skywalker or whatever side of the aisle you fall on there. I think his heart is that he needs someone with him to do this, so to speak. But continue.
Yeah, and I think you can make an argument, at least craving attention. I mean, that could be the mask, right? Or that persona of the Vader-like figure. That's him wanting the attention. I don't know that we got a lot of him wanting admiration. I guess you could make that same argument. Maybe the lashing out again, right? He's doing that just to get attention, for people to look at him and fear him in some way. So yeah, I definitely see that, at least there. All right, number 10, stepping on others is second nature.
I see a lot of that in The Force Awakens. Like, he's kind of gung-ho. He wants what he wants, and obviously he does that with Poe, and then he does that with what do you call it, with Rey, with the interrogation and stuff. With the Last Jedi, I guess, yeah, in a way, because he does that with Rey in a sense. Because if you go back to my argument of the manipulation and kind of luring her to the dark side, so to speak, yeah, and of course, yeah, I would go
Snoke.
Yeah,
what he does to Snoke.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. Number 11, we got two more here. Entitled people like to dominate those around them.
Yeah, I think he definitely does. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think we probably talked about that in other answers here. And then the last one is they're commonly known as a bully.
Well, by our standards, yeah, you could say he's a bully. I mean, he forces himself in a way where he wants what he wants. As he says, I can take what I want, right? So, I mean,
true.
Yeah, I would say yes, definitely. So, yeah, I would say we'd come down that he senses he's got a bit of an entitlement. Now, is that because of his upbringing? Obviously, in the sense that, all right, he's technically a prince of Alderaan when you think about it. His father's a legendary smuggler, pirate, hero of the rebellion, race spacer. He's racing around with the Falcon and everything like that. He's training all these other people to race and everything. And then Luke Skywalker's your uncle, who's blew up the Death Star. All these things, and then come to find out, Anakin Skywalker, when he was a Jedi, was a hero at that time. Then he turned to Vader, and that whole thing. Like, that's quite a legacy, to that burden of the legacy, which I think is a compelling thing with him. And if Rey was a Skywalker, and that wasn't really, I guess, in Ryan's mind's eye, yeah, she's not a Skywalker. But as he said, in 9, they could do whatever they want. And I think Ryan kind of smartly left it open where it could be retconned. I hate using that word, to something like that. So yeah, I think he has that entitlement, especially because of the Prince thing, and then, Princess Leia in a sense. And yeah, his parents probably tried to do the best they could. They're off being, one's racing, and Han, I got to be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about Han just going off and racing and doing his thing and kind of leaving Leia back. I'm sure he was a loving, caring father, but Leia was kind of at one point trying to train as a Jedi, then said, no, I got to be a senator. And she was a senator. So I sense, he's being raised by Uncle C-3PO, I guess you could say. I don't know, or R2. So,
yeah,
there's that whole thing. And I don't know. What do you think with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a strong argument to be made that he has a sense of entitlement. And, you've got to think, based on just how Snoke was talking to him and the way he talks to him, he's probably feeding him all of this too, right? He's telling him, this is all yours. All of this belongs to you. You're, the Prince of Alderaan. You're heir to Lord Vader, to that throne, that kind of thing. I mean, I assume he's constantly feeding that into his ego and building up this sense of entitlement to the point where it's at today. Going back and look at those answers, I think we answered pretty much yes to every single one of them. But one of the things that I kept noticing a trend was we were answering yes, but it was in one movie or maybe the other. And then that kind of speaks to just how dynamic that character is and how much he's already evolved over those 2 movies. And we kind of talked about it. He is one of the coolest, most complex characters, I think, certainly in Star Wars. But I mean, you can make that argument for any number of other movies that have these characters that are just this, crazy or complex or whatever word you want to use it or insert there. But I did want to read one other thing too that I kind of pulled this from this psychology bulletin that kind of talks a little bit more about.
Which is good because we did a psychology episode on Kylo, and we did borderline multi-personality disorder, I think is what we came down with as our diagnosis, which isn't really, I mean, it's a fictional character, so it's not exactly. And at the time, I remember one of the Dr. Travis Langley, who does the pop culture psychology books, which I read quite a bit. And he did a little blog post about us podcasting about it. And he mentioned, and one of the questions we even posed in that episode, you can go listen to it. At least I think we did. In my mind, I think we did. Is we said, is it too early to even diagnose Kylo? Because we didn't have a lot at the point. So how could we even come up with that? We were piecing things together at that point. I think I still fall on what we came up with at that point, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say here.
Yeah, and it's not a whole lot, but it was something interesting about at least the sense of entitlement itself. And so this comes from the Psychology Bulletin. It's from Joshua Grubbs, who's the primary author of this. He said, at extreme levels, entitlement is a toxic narcissistic trait, repeatedly exposing people to the risk of feeling frustrated, unhappy, and disappointed with life. Now, it goes on to say that reacting to perceived injustices, entitled people may direct their anger outward, blaming others while reassuring themselves of their own specialness, thus beginning the cycle again. And this cycle, they break it down into basically 3 stages, right? The first stage is the entitlement creates a constant vulnerability to unmet expectations. So we talked about that earlier. Those unmet expectations, this is cycle 2 or stage 2. Those unmet expectations then lead to dissatisfaction and other volatile emotions. And then that third stage is emotional distress demands a remedy, leading to the reinforcement of superiority. So that in and of itself is almost what we see Kylo Ren struggling with both in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. So it's safe to say that I think he definitely has a high level of sense of entitlement just based on our professional questions that we got here and some of the stuff that came out of this paper here.
I mean, for me, it goes back to The Force Awakens where he mentally loses it when he's wrecking the console and all that other stuff. And not even so much when he says, "Oh, you're so right," and he takes down Laura Santeca there. I didn't get it from there, but it was after the fact when things obviously don't go his way. That's when he starts to lose his grip on things and his sense of I'm special, I'm really the chosen one. And even if you want to go based on what Mark Hamill said in Vanity Fair, I think it was, or Entertainment Weekly, whichever one it was, where he thought Ben was the chosen one. I'm sure that's in his head as well. You know what I mean? You just add that wrinkle on top of it. Like, I think I'm special and I was supposed to do this and that. But the interesting thing, and I want to point it out here is, and I think maybe this is where Luke is trying to, we should probably break down Luke and his dynamic as well before we get into the redemption stuff here, just real quick. And I'll point this out is I noticed when you look at the Jedi temple that Luke was at there, his academy or whatever you want to call it, he goes into Kylo's hut, and his hut is like on the outskirts. It's not even in the temple per se. Mm-hmm. So it makes me feel like, did Luke try to intentionally maybe humble him, and it wasn't working out in a sense, and then Luke knew there was something off because Luke took his training, he was older now, and Snoke was in his mind and all that other stuff. But, let's get into the dynamic of Luke and him, and we'll start right from there at the temple there, when Luke goes in and tries to basically murder him, although he had the thought of it. And maybe I'll mention this here, is like with Luke, he didn't want to fight his father, but he had his moments of doubt. Even with his father, when he went to fight, he grabbed the saber because he was worried about the rebellion falling apart. He grabs the saber and then he says, "Well, I will not fight you." But then he says the magic words, "Oh, your sister," and he loses it because he's got to protect his sister and all that. And he had that moment of doubt, and he was ready to go to the dark side. So that whole thing with Luke not wanting to kill his father and then having those moments, he did have that. So I don't want to defend Rian here, but I'm just saying that it's been happening because you would think in the 35 years or 30 years or whatever, Luke would have grown from that and not had those moments of doubts. But we all have doubts. I mean, I'm 40 years old, 41 years old. I have doubts. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, people are creatures of habits, right? So, but anyway, back to Ben being on the outskirts and stuff, and Luke's, I guess, delusion of thinking he's the chosen one, if you want, which is an interesting thing. But we didn't get that answer really, and I thought we were in this movie, which is kind of a problem for me. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that whole chosen one was that red herring that the Brez threw down on that Entertainment Weekly magazine thing. So that never really paid out, and that's fine. I'm not really hung up on that by any means. But I mean, yeah, I would agree with all of that. Luke, first and foremost, is human. He has emotions. He's not going to be perfect. As a kid, I thought he was perfect, but I like the fact that they made him, human. They made him less than perfect. And to your point, he had that moment, and there was a lot of time that passed in between there. I think it's safe to say, guys, that this wasn't the first time that Luke had a moment of weakness. For all we know, he just wasn't a good teacher, right? Going back to what you'd said about, putting him outside in a separate location, that's probably maybe wasn't the best choice, but he's never done this before. He grew up on a farm, moisture farm. He wasn't required to do this training. He's trying to figure all this out on his own. And that's a lot of pressure for anybody, and just remove Star Wars from it. Anybody that knows anything about trying to either one, raise kids, or two, teach children, it's difficult, and you're not going to make the right choices. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to have moments of weakness and do stupid things and say things that you regret. That's just part of being a human. That's part of being a leader or a parent or whatever you want to label him in that moment. So, him isolating him probably wasn't the best thing. Maybe he felt like he was doing the right thing, but I can tell you right now, whenever I isolate one of my own children or I see it happen in school, it should only be very temporary. It shouldn't be a permanent thing. And if that was something that he was doing, maybe that played into this whole thing with Kylo Ren, and how he ended up, turning out to be. So, I mean, I really do like that human element of it. It was shocking the first viewing. It probably is still shocking to think that my long life hero, did what he did and all of that. But, if I'm being completely objective here and really understand or trying to understand where he's coming from as a man, as a human being, as a person, I can see where this is probably, just kind of common. It's going to happen, I think.
Well, it's kind of a Jedi tradition in the sense where Qui-Gon kind of forces Obi-Wan to take on an apprentice when he wasn't ready. Yoda kind of, tells Luke, pass on what you've learned. And and to Luke's credit, he goes off and learns things about the Force and, other Force users and stuff like that. So he did take his time. However, in that moment, he never learned how to teach, I guess. Right. And this is, he wasn't even ready to take on Ben Solo at that point and all these other students. So that's an interesting component right there. And, Luke, I can't fault him too much. I mean, I like that he's more humanized in this. I just wish he had more of an epic moment, I guess you could say. But, well, speaking of which, we'll get into that now. But back to your point with the entitlement thing, before we go to that, is where Ben obviously wouldn't take it that well because he thinks he's special. You even said you're the chosen ones. We'll just pretend he said that to Ben. He thinks he's special, and then Luke's trying to humble him, but he takes it as a humiliation.
Or treats him the same as everyone else.
Correct.
How would he feel about that? I can, based on what we know, I don't think that would sit well with Kylo Ren.
Correct. And then you got to
Ben. Sorry,
no, that's okay. And you got to think he's not taking that well because he's like, well, wait a minute, I'm a Skywalker like you, man. We're pretty powerful in the Force, man. I mean, come on, Right. I mean, what are you doing to me here? And then you got to think back to the prequels where Anakin was probably treated special in a way, and that upset the other Jedis in a way. You know what I mean? Like the Jedi in a way. Like we've joked before. Like it seems like Anakin never had any Jedi buddies or anything at the temple because they kind of looked at him as an oddball. I would think. I think that's why he was so close to Obi-Wan, is because Obi-Wan was really his only friend, so to speak. I guess that's just speculation on my part, but it would make kind of sense why he had no problem slaughtering everyone. I guess I don't know. And that to that point, but in any case, well, let's go into the final duel with Kylo here. Obviously, Kylo knows Luke is a powerful Jedi, and that's why he says every gun on him and shoot him because he knows. And to his credit, he's probably the only one there that knows, other than Leia, maybe knows that this is a bad thing that Luke showed up. I would have preferred Luke actually showing up and making it more epic that way, but that's just that's to each their own, But anyway, so what did you think of that whole where he's apologizing to Ben? Actually, let's go to this thing where Ben first says to him, of course, snarky, I guess you could say, whereas you come to save me, kind of throwing in Luke's face that he saved his father, he redeemed his father, and Luke just blatantly says no. And maybe that was kind of a shock to Kylo. I don't know. What did you think of that whole there when that first happened?
Yeah, I almost felt like this was just, they kind of picked, their relationship may have picked up where it left off. Like, I'm not going to give you what you're wanting here, right? I'm not going to give into that. You did something horrible. You're still a kid. You still haven't learned anything. And I'm about to fix all of this, even though I'm leaving. I'm going to fix all this. I'm going to start a path of correction for all of this. That involves me. It involves you. It involves Rey. And that's kind of how I saw it from Luke's perspective, that he was almost kind of like he was we know that he was taunting them or at least trying to, buy some time for those guys to get away. But to me, it felt like that was just a kind of continuation of where they've been. And Luke's had a lot of time to think about what to say and what to do and how to get under his skin. I mean, I'm sure he played this moment out a number of million different ways, a number of different times.
I'm sure even in his training, almost kind of Yoda-like, where he got under his skin a little bit, riled him up.
Yeah, he knows his weakness.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Exposes the weakness. He knows what the weakness is and stuff. And, apparently it wasn't as chummy as I thought it was, their relationship at one point. I thought it was kind of like an Obi-Wan Anakin thing at one point, but apparently that's not the case. So, and then, that whole thing where he says, I failed you and I'm sorry. I thought that was an interesting thing that he says, I'm sorry. He doesn't say, I just failed you. He just says, I'm sorry, which I think is an important thing that he would say that to him and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it was almost reminiscent of Obi-Wan,
Correct.
Right? When he was talking to Anakin saying, I failed you, Anakin. You were like a brother to me, that kind of thing. It was,
but he doesn't say sorry. Like Luke meant.
No, he doesn't apologize. That's true.
Luke
right?
does say, and sorry goes a long way. That we're taught that. So I thought that was interesting that he says I was sorry, and he was very sincere about it and stuff. And then they get into their snarkiness, so to speak, and going back and forth. And then Kylo, I guess he gets this sense that he's more powerful or something like that, because he starts giving the speech, I'm going to kill the Last Jedi and all this other stuff. And then he mentions after that, he says, I'm going to kill her as well, this is what my argument with the Reylo fans is, well, first off, he was going to blow her out of the sky, but he's supposed to be in love with her. And then this point here where he's like, I'll kill her too. Like, I think he's really gone at this point. And then you got to go to what Luke and Leia say. And this is where the redemption, we'll get into that in a second here, is where I don't know if they can redeem him, because Luke blatantly says, I can't save him. I didn't come here to save him. And then Leia's like, well, I know I held out for so long. He's really gone now. Mm-hmm. And then Luke goes and says, no, I'm not here to save you. I'm just doing my thing to buy time. But you don't know that because you're impulsive, you're entitled. All those things that we just went over kind of plays into it. And Luke's playing off of that. And this is the problem with when, it goes back to what Snoke said. You're just a child in the mask. Although now he's a child with a scar on his face and no mask and a cape and everything. And that stuff. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on any of all that?
Yeah, I think so. I think for the way I walked away with that line that Luke says, I can't save him, it almost to me felt open, like I can't do it, but it's probably somebody else's job, and maybe someone else can. I think really he was there just to kind of tie up loose ends. Sure, he was there to buy time and for everybody to get away, right? That was kind of that plot element of it. But at the same time, I think he was making his peace. That's why he said, I'm sorry. That's why he said, no, I'm not here to fix all this or whatever. I think he was really making his peace. He was tying up loose ends, so to speak. And I just can't see, what, I really have a hard time with, I guess, Luke going out the way he did, but at the same time, I get it. I get why he was doing it and why we didn't get the epic lightsaber duel or lightsaber fight that, maybe we were all kind of hoping for. But, I'm okay with that. But I would like to let's talk about that redemption piece, because that's the one that really kind of is looking forward now as we talk about 9 coming up. And where Kylo is. I know we touched on it in the last episode with the whole apprentice thing and all that. But what do you think here? I mean, what are you thinking as far as like redemption goes for Kylo?
I don't know, because the interesting thing is what Luke says to him. If you strike me down, I'll be with you. Basically, like your father. Like that baggage is going to start adding up. And who knows what happens with Leia going forward. That'll be interesting there. And it's sad that we didn't get a mother-son moment or anything like that. I mean, we kind of did, but we didn't get it in person or anything like that. And I think this is where I struggle with it in a sense, is because there wasn't a one-to-one meeting with them per se. and then like even Luke wasn't really there. So I have problems with that, but I mean, I get it. This is a story that's fine. We're going to discuss it there. As far as the redemption goes, I'm not sure they're going to really redeem him, at least not yet. In my mind, if they're going forward with 10, 11, and 12, Kylo's the supreme leader and he's the bad guy for the next handful of movies. You know what I mean? And maybe Rey is set up to where at some point she will redeem him, and that'll be interesting how that happens. I mean, obviously it would be in a way, but this is where I have a problem with it, and maybe it's my ignorance because of what's come before, and that's part of the lesson of The Last Jedi is breaking free of what's come before. I get that, and like I said, I struggle with things that are in this movie, and I will resolve them at some point down the line, is the fact that, all right, Kylo doesn't have that baggage of someone controlling him, having a leash around him, that type of thing, where where Vader was doing that, and then he did that. He threw that baggage down the hole, and the Emperor and everything, and he was finally free from the Jedi, free from, being a slave on Tatooine, being a Sith Lord, being a slave to Palpatine. Like, he was finally free of all that and could be him and just die in peace. Now, how is Kylo going to have that? You know what I mean? Like, how does he have that? What would be the sacrifice that would become the redemption? You know what I mean? So sure. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. All right. So let me just read a real quick quote by, Rian Johnson was asked whether or not he felt that, Kylo could be redeemed. And to quote, he said, "Are you kidding? Vader was worse than Kylo ever was, I think, and Vader got redeemed." So, I mean, we know from Star Wars, and I think from certainly other lore and legends, that the whole notion of redemption and living are not mutually exclusive. I'm still standing by wanting to see him redeemed, I guess, but I mean, I hate Kylo Ren so much, and that's a good thing. I don't mean that in an ill way in any way. It's not a slight against Adam Driver or the character, but I really I despise him now at this point. I didn't so much of the first movie, but this movie I really don't like him as a character.
I'm like you. I despise him, but I'm intrigued by him. Like, I want to know where they're going with him, and I find him compelling. I just despise him as a character, and that's fine. I don't really particularly. And by the way, with Han Solo, we were watching I don't know if I told you this, and I'll just real quick, and we'll jump back into the thing. My daughter likes to play Han Solo in Battlefront 2, and it broke my heart because I obviously not a big fan of Han Solo. And when Han Solo gets impaled, she actually cried. I was like, "Oh man!"
Oh, I'm
like, I didn't cry. I smiled at that point. But anyway, that's me. But anyway, continue. Go on with. Go on. Yes.
No. Yeah. So I would like to see him. I guess I don't really want to see him redeem. I guess because I hate him. But on the same path, I mean, I'd be okay if his end was just super tragic and pathetic, like Anakin when he died. I mean, that may sound cruel, but like they say, life sucks and then you die. So
pretty much.
Yeah. And I think that maybe the more compelling question is, and you kind of brought this up earlier, is what could he possibly do to complete this redemption arc? We don't have Snoke maybe to contend with in the next movie. We talked last episode about an apprentice, but that seems kind of like a faint possibility at best right now. He's got the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, and you can call him Renper or whatever, Supreme Leader Ren or whatever. And he's really the only antagonist apart from Hux, which, we talked about that too. I don't know that he's going to do a whole lot there. So, all that's left for him really to do to actually complete a redemption arc. He's got to suffer, and he's got to make one last act of self-sacrifice to earn that redemption. And usually if you follow that whole trope, they've got to come up with that sacrifice has to be equal in terms, with the crime that they paid, all that stuff, the bad stuff that they did. And he's done some pretty horrible things. We know that for sure. And there's probably some things that we don't know that happened, off the movies and not in novels. So I think it's all very fascinating at this point, and something that JJ is really going to have to contend with. And certainly I don't envy doing so.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what I said with my question is, what baggage does he have to get rid of, like Vader did? And even Luke to a degree, where Luke had to overcome that fear and that whole, that whole thing. So with his character, it's almost like now he's just the bad guy, and he's going to cause havoc for Rey in the Resistance, and maybe the redemption comes later on in 12 or something, where he does something to save the Resistance and Rey and whoever else. I'm not sure. Maybe something was in the works where he saves his mother. That would have been a great redemption right then and there. And I think it comes down to the whole question of, all right, is he redeemed? I think in the eyes of the Force, yes, he can be redeemed. And then in the eyes of the public. Like Vader isn't loved in the public. Like he's a bad guy. He was never redeemed. They don't care what Luke did and that whole thing. He was bad. And, Leia had the fallout with bloodlines and that whole thing. And I'm still going under the thing that Ben knew about it because either Snoke told him or Luke said, hey, by the way, Anakin was kind of bad. Just want to throw that out there and stuff like that. But I think with and I've mentioned this before, and I might have even mentioned it last week with Kylo, and it goes back to the concept art book, which I love the concept art books. As you mentioned last week when you were talking about it, I think that, because they had the concept for Anakin Skywalker with the light and the dark whole thing, and people said, well, with Anakin, they could do that. I'm like, nah, that kind of craps on Anakin's character. Like, he went back to the light and he let go of everything. That was the point. With Kylo, right, he could be the guy that's in between, where he's going to be that guy with the light and the dark, and you're going to see him in the shadows and in the light, and kind of maybe haunting Rey or whatever, and antagonizing Rey in the future or something like that. And it almost like they set it up with that Force vision thing with Rey going back and forth. And we should probably talk about Rey and Kylo and the whole thing going on with there. But I mean, was there a lot there with the Reylo? Not the Reylo thing. Like, I'm not talking the romantic thing, but like with their Force connection and their dynamic of going between each other, finding not love, but like common ground of like the loneliness and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. Just real quick, if you can. I feel bad we didn't really talk about it, to be honest. But
yeah, you're talking about the Force timing thing.
Yeah, like the connection that they have at that point. Like, obviously she closed the door on him at the end there, and that whole thing, and he has the dice, and they disappear. It's like he's completely cut off of everything that he was attached to with the good. That's kind of how I took it. Like, his mom doesn't care about him. Well, not that she doesn't. She's let go of that whole hope of him being himself. I think even Rey kind of sees it, and she lets go of that. And, obviously Luke is like, hey, I'll see you around, kid, because I'm going to haunt you now. That type of stuff. So I don't know. What did you think of that whole dynamic? Even them communicating with each other. And as we touched on earlier, obviously Snoke played a big factor in that. But, how do you think they're, like, when they were communicating with each other and stuff, and he's revealing these things to Rey and vice versa, and they have these visions, and then they go off and they take out Snoke together, or, well, the Praetorian Guards, really, not Snoke so much. But quickly, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So that Force timing thing, the aspect of it in The Last Jedi was very unique. And I have to wonder if Snoke, if Snoke was responsible for the full extent of what we saw. So specifically that whole transference of the physical. We had that one scene with the water in Kylo's hands when Rey was under, at the shoreline under the Falcon, right? And then we had the hand sex scene and all that. But I can see Snoke creating that link between the two and connecting them, but it almost felt like there was something else there that was at play that allowed them and their surroundings to kind of also be connected, which I thought was a really cool dynamic. One last thought on Snoke, I guess, is, we talked about it earlier, but how did he not see this coming? We could, he closes his eyes and goes to that whole thing about, I can see him turning the lightsaber and all of that, and I can see his every intent. But, I have to wonder if Kylo was somehow, maybe sending him false imagery or something. Was he, I don't think he wasn't turning to the light. I think Snoke would have been cued off by that, or at least been alarmed once that happened. But it's an interesting dynamic that we now know that Snoke was the one that brought them together, that allowed that to happen. But maybe that was just some kind of manifestation of their own powers together. Individually, they're super powerful, but even together like that connectedness allowed them for that physical transference thing to kind of happen.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it just like Snoke sensed it and just amplified it, so to speak. Because the interesting thing is Snoke didn't really, she wasn't in his presence. I know Kylo was, and I don't know how he got the link up, I guess you could say. I don't know how he got them to dial up or whatever and sync up their minds. That's the interesting thing there. But going forward, what do you think their relationship is? Just real quick, I think it's pretty much adversary and maybe interesting dialogue where there's a bit of them trying to bring each other back to each other's side, so to speak. But I don't think it goes any beyond that. I don't know. That's just me. I could be completely wrong and I'll be fine with it. But what do you think? Yeah,
I'm honestly, I can go either way, to be fair. I don't try to get into this whole rail. I have my own opinion thing as far as where I would like to see it go. And for me, and maybe I'm cruel and sick, which I'm really not, which is kind of weird that I'm saying this, but I like the idea of him being like failing and maybe even still wanting that from Rey and Rey not reciprocating that, and him going and living, this tragic life and
being solo,
maybe being solo, right? He wanted to live this. He had this vision of what Anakin's life was like and what his grandfather's life was like, Vader's life was like, and he wanted all that. And I don't think he really understood what that meant. And I would like to see that maybe as the lesson that be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. I would like to see that kind of horribly go wrong for him at the very end. And maybe he has his redemption arc and all that, but at the same time, that's really the only highlight in his life. I would like to kind of see that story played out.
Well, to be honest, he's trying to eliminate all that he's attached to. It goes back to that Yoda thing, don't be attached and stuff. But we learned the lesson is to actually have family. That was Luke and that whole thing. And that's why he succeeded, so to speak. He had friends and families that he loved and all that stuff, where Anakin, didn't, he kind of had that, but he went the other way with it. You know what I mean? Now, Kylo here is just eliminating all of that attachment, but yet he wants to be with somebody. He wants someone to rule with him, I guess you could say, for the lack of a better term. And he wants to train someone. So he wants that companionship and everything, but he's just eliminating it all. But now he's craving that attachment to someone or something like that. And now he doesn't have it at all. So that'll be interesting to see how that gets him maybe even more reckless and more angry. And the other thing I want to say real quickly, we'll wrap it up here, is now that he's in charge and Luke exposed him for being, I guess you could say, a fool, and kind of exposing the fact that he was irrational and did all these things. How is the First Order going to follow him now? Is it going to be the guy that they just saw like that? Or is Kylo going to learn from that and be more mature and not be head on into things and kind of be reckless about things? Is he going to be a little more smart? Like, I'm intrigued by all of that. How is he going to man the helm? Or maybe he walks away? I don't know. I mean, I don't think he would at that point, because I think he craves power and his greed is on his side, so to speak. But I don't know. What are your final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, so final thoughts there. I don't know. I think he wants the power, but I think he wants it for him and someone else. I think you were kind of saying that a couple minutes ago, but he wants something else there. We don't need to get into it now, and maybe we can table this for another show. But if we do tackle this whole Reylo thing, there is this usurper trope that the storyline is kind of following almost to a T. And if we follow down that same path, he wouldn't take the power, even though he has it. He probably would give it to someone else. He may take it temporarily, but if it follows that same trope, I think he ends up getting rid of it or kind of disconnecting from it. So, at least it's hard to say just because of the way the movie ended. It could go a couple of different ways, but maybe we'll hit that up in another show here.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week. I think next week, maybe we'll do Rey. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, so I guess you guys, if you want to find us, like us, and all that other stuff, you can check out the show description. All our links are there. It's just much easier if you just click on that and go from there and stuff like that. But Albert, I think we're done for this week. Any final words, and we'll be out of here.
Dope. Looking forward to it. We'll see you.
All right. Later, everybody. You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.